The Young and the Restless spoilers Tuesday full episodes June 17, 2025. The tension in Genoa City had long since stopped simmering, it boiled just beneath the surface, invisible to those who didn't know where to look. But for those who understood the language of power, the subtle betrayals, the deflections behind every smile, the city had never been more volatile. And for Chelsea Lawson, the air around her had become so thick with unsaid truths and poorly buried regrets that she could barely breathe without feeling like she was choking on her past. She should have stayed out of it. That was what logic told her. That was what survival dictated. But logic had never ruled Chelsea, not when it came to Billy Abbott. She had loved him once in a way that terrified her. That love had broken her. And yet here she was again, walking up the front steps of the Newman Tower penthouse, willing to risk everything for a man who barely spoke her name anymore. Victor Newman was already waiting. Not standing, not pacing, sitting behind his desk with the patience of a predator. The light from the window behind him framed him like a statue carved from power and judgment. He didn't move when Chelsea entered, nor did he greet her. He simply looked at her with eyes that had watched empires rise and fall, sometimes at his command. "Chelsea," he said at last, the word rolling out with faint amusement. "To what do I owe the displeasure?" She didn't flinch. "I know who Aristotle Dumas really is." The words came out stronger than she felt. Victor blinked, once. Slowly. Then leaned back in his chair and exhaled through his nose, the way one might when hearing a child recite a bedtime story. "Do you now?" he said, tone dipped in sarcasm. "And let me guess, you think he's Tucker McCall?" She held her ground. "I think he could be. Tucker disappeared months ago. Rumors say he's in custody, but no one's seen proof. Dumas wears a mask. If it's Tucker under there, it would explain everything." Victor chuckled, that low, dismissive, unshakable Newman laugh that meant he was either 5 steps ahead or about to destroy you for fun. "Tucker is rotting in an Indian prison, eating rice and contemplating his poor life decisions. Aristotle Dumas is not Tucker McCall. You've been watching too much television, Chelsea." She stepped closer. "Then who is he, Victor? If you really know, why are you letting this happen? Why are you letting your own family walk into whatever trap he's building?" Victor rose, slowly. His height alone was enough to send a shiver down Chelsea's spine, but it was his tone that turned the room cold. "Because I already dealt with the threat, Miss Lawson. The only people who need protecting right now are the ones who think they can manipulate me. Are you one of them?" She hesitated. She had come with a plan. She had rehearsed every word. And now, faced with Victor's granite composure, it all unraveled. "I'm trying to stop a war," she said, voice cracking slightly. "I'm trying to stop Adam from going after Billy." "I'm trying to protect Billy?" Victor interrupted. "The man who nearly destroyed your life once? The man who abandoned you when you were drowning in grief? Or are you just trying to insert yourself into something that's no longer yours to save?" Chelsea's eyes filled, but not with tears, with fury. "You think this is about love? About nostalgia? You think I want him back?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "Don't you?" The silence was damning. "Finally," she said, "Billy doesn't deserve what's coming to him. Not like this. Not by Dumas, not by Adam, not by you. If you want a name, I'll give it to you. Just call off the dogs." Victor walked around his desk, closer now. His voice dropped into something darker. "There is nothing you can offer me that I don't already know. I know who Dumas is. I know what he wants. And I know how this ends. You, Chelsea, are a piece on a board you barely understand. So unless you want to be taken off it, get out." But she didn't move. She stared into Victor's eyes and whispered, "Then prove it. Tell me who he is." Victor smiled, cold and satisfied. "His name," he said slowly, "is not Tucker. And that's all you'll get. But since you're so curious, he comes from a family older than mine. His wealth was hidden in silence. His mother was erased from public record. His father died mysteriously during a failed merger in Genoa City. That's who you're dealing with. Chelsea felt the blood drain from her face. You're lying, she whispered. Victor smirked. Am I? And with that, he turned his back on her. The conversation was over. The warning had been delivered. But the damage was only just beginning. Later that evening, Adam found her outside society, pacing like a woman unraveling. You saw my father, he asked. She nodded. And? She hesitated, then said, I tried to get him to back off Billy. It didn't go well. Adam folded his arms. Why would you do that? His voice was low, accusatory. Why are you always trying to protect Billy? Chelsea looked away. Because he doesn't deserve to be blindsided. Not again. Are you still in love with him? Adam asked. No hesitation. No pretense. The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Chelsea met his gaze. No, she said. But I'll always care. And if you can't understand the difference, then maybe we've both been pretending. Adam didn't respond. He didn't need to. The walls were back up. The trust fractured. Meanwhile, Billy had his own questions. Hours later, after a terse conversation with Jack, he found himself sitting alone at the Grand Phoenix bar, a single scotch untouched before him. Chelsea's name had come up more than once in recent days, too often to ignore. He hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Had barely thought about her outside the context of shared history. But now she was trying to defend him to Victor? What did that mean? Was she protecting him or setting him up? He didn't know. And that uncertainty, coming from someone who once knew her heartbeat by instinct, was more terrifying than Dumas ever could be. The real question no one could answer was this: if Chelsea was wrong, who exactly was Aristotle Dumas? And if she was right, why was Victor so desperate to convince her otherwise? Because in Genoa City, secrets aren't just currency, they're weapons. And someone, somewhere, had just pulled the pin. Would you like me to continue into the next phase, where Adam confronts Chelsea in private and discovers something about Dumas she never meant to reveal? Or perhaps where Billy receives a mysterious message, possibly from Dumas himself, hinting at Chelsea's deeper involvement in the upcoming takedown? The rain had returned to Genoa City like a prophecy fulfilled, cold, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Storms in Wisconsin always came with a kind of slow dread, like the weather was trying to warn everyone to stay inside, to shut their mouths, to keep their secrets buried. But no one was listening. Not anymore. Not when truth was becoming weaponized, and family ties were unraveling faster than anyone could stitch them back together. Holden's voice cracked through the corridors of the Newman Ranch like a whip. You lied to me, Damien. The rage in his throat had nowhere else to go. His fists were clenched, his jaw trembling, not from fear, but from the agony of betrayal. You told me you were dead. You had someone take your place. You made me believe I was talking to my real brother, and now you want my loyalty? Damien didn't blink. He just stood there, cool and controlled, like the eye of a hurricane. I did what I had to do to protect you. His voice was too calm, too deliberate. You weren't ready for the truth. You still aren't. That was when Nate stepped in, and his entrance was anything but quiet. You're both liars. Nate barked, jabbing a finger in Holden's direction. But you are worse. You slithered into this family like you belonged, played the noble outsider, won everyone over, and all the while, you were hiding everything. You think you're better than Damien? His voice was sharp, rising with every syllable. He lied once. You lie every damn time you open your mouth. Holden turned, eyes burning. You don't know anything about me. Oh, I know enough, Nate spat. I know Audra doesn't look at me the way she looks at you. I know that ever since you got here, she's been more distant, more guarded. Don't pretend this is about family, Holden. You're just another manipulator, another con artist who thinks he can rewrite his identity every time he shows up in a new zip code. There it was. The real wound. Not Dumas. Not Damien. Not even the fractured legacy of their father. It was Audra. The woman who had once sworn to Nate she was all in, now keeping her eyes too long on someone she claimed to despise. Holden didn't deny it. He just stared at Nate, long and cold, and said nothing. Because sometimes silence hurts more than words. And in that silence, Nate exploded. I should have known you weren't who you said you were from the moment you started sniffing around Victor. That's all this is, right? Another move on the chessboard. Another way to worm your way into power, into legacy. You don't care about Damien. You don't care about me. You're here for her. You're here for you. Across town, in the Newman Tower, Victor Newman stood alone in his office, staring out at the rain. The skyline flickered in the distance, half obscured by the storm. Nikki had gone to lie down after a brutal afternoon of tension and worry. Dumas was getting too close. The past was getting too loud. And Victor. Victor had reached the point in the game where he could no longer afford to keep the pieces on the board blind. He turned to his cabinet, opened a locked drawer, and pulled out a thin, weathered file. The label read, Dumas, A. Classified. Inside were documents no one else in Genoa City had seen. Birth records with half-erased names. Offshore banking ledgers. Property transfers disguised as charity. And photographs. Black and white images of a boy, eyes dark as coal, standing in front of a burned-out estate in Europe. One photo showed the boy with a woman, tall, stern, aristocratic. Her name was scrawled faintly across the back, Valeria Dumas. Deceased. Victor sighed. The truth was uglier than even he had expected. He stepped toward the phone, punched in a number he hadn't used in a decade, and waited. When the voice on the other end picked up, he said only, "It's time." He's making his move. And Nikki. Nikki can't know what I did. Because the truth was this, Aristotle Dumas was not a stranger to Genoa City's elite. He had once been one of them. Hidden. Unacknowledged. Born of a tryst between a European heiress and a man whose name still haunted the Newman family ledgers. He had grown up in exile, raised by shadows, trained not in boardrooms, but in silence and survival. Victor had known his name for years. He had buried it like a landmine. And now that landmine had risen with a smile and a vendetta. Victor turned toward the desk and began assembling files. Not to hand over, but to destroy. There were too many things Nikki didn't know. About Dumas. About the choices Victor had made to keep him out of the Newman fold. About the war he started before Dumas ever set foot on American soil. Back at the ranch, Nate had stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Holden stood alone, staring at Damien, who looked almost ashamed. You still think this was all about you? Damien asked. It was never about just you, Holden. It was about protecting a lineage that was stolen. About correcting a legacy that was rewritten by men like Victor. Holden's voice was hollow now. You lied. Over and over. And now I don't know if I'm more like you, or more like them. Damien stepped forward. Maybe you're both. But it's not about blood anymore. It's about the future. And that future doesn't belong to Victor Newman, or to Dumas. It belongs to us. If we survive. Somewhere far away, Aristotle Dumas sat in the ruins of his chateau, watching as the rain fell through broken stained glass windows. He lit a cigar, took a slow drag, and smiled. The storm had arrived. And Genoa City was about to drown. Would you like the next chapter? Where Nikki confronts Victor about his hidden connection to Dumas, or a sudden murder in town forces Nate and Holden into an unwanted alliance, just as Dumas returns to the city for his final move. Jack Abbott had always trusted his instincts. They had carried him through hostile takeovers, saved his company from ruin, and even protected his heart when betrayal lurked closest. But this time, the instinct wasn't whispering. It was screaming. When he had first heard the name Aristotle Dumas, it meant nothing, an enigmatic player entering the arena of the elite with resources, elegance, and just enough mystique to avoid suspicion. Jack, like the others, had been intrigued. For a man who had spent his life surrounded by legacy names, Newman, Chancellor, Winters, McCall, the appearance of a new competitor wasn't threatening. It was refreshing. Invigorating, even. A new mind to challenge. A new player on the board. But now, weeks later, that intrigue had soured into unease. At first, it had been the subtle inconsistencies, the business fronts Dumas controlled that led nowhere, the phantom board members, the clean but shallow paper trail. Then came the maze, the estate, the riddles, and the growing list of people who walked away from encounters with Dumas changed, rattled, unsure of what they had seen or felt. And now, with Victor's revelations echoing in his mind like a warning bell, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer walking toward an opportunity. He was walking into a trap. Victor's words still rang in his memory. That this wasn't a man. This was a reckoning. That Dumas didn't just want power. He wanted to unmake legacies. He wanted to destroy what took decades to build, and replace it with something colder. More personal. Jack hadn't wanted to believe it. He had always been wary of Victor's dramatics. But even Diane had noticed the tension mounting in her husband, the way he woke in the middle of the night, fingers clenched, sweat on his brow, as if Dumas's name had become an incantation for nightmares. By the time the formal invitation arrived, sealed with gold wax, delivered by hand, Jack had made up his mind. He would go. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. He needed to look this man in the eyes. He needed to know what they were up against. He needed to know what Dumas saw when he looked at Genoa City's elite, and more importantly, what he planned to do with it. The invitation summoned all guests to the Dumas estate for an evening of revelations. The wording was deliberate, theatrical. Amanda Sinclair was among those invited, though no one knew why. Her ties to Dumas were vague at best. Or so it seemed. As the black sedans began arriving one by one at the circular driveway, there was an unspoken anxiety in the air. Nikki clutched Victor's hand, her expression unreadable. Adam stood apart from the others, flanked by Chelsea, whose eyes rarely strayed from Billy. Nate arrived with Audra, though neither said a word to each other. Devon and Lily walked together, as if united by some silent pact. And then there was Amanda? Poised, radiant, but internally bracing herself for a truth she could no longer keep buried. The guests were ushered into the grand hall, where Dumas had arranged seating like a courtroom. The chairs were in a wide semicircle, each labeled with a name, each lit from above by a single pendant light. There was no music. No host. Just the slow ticking of the infamous Dumas clock overhead. And then, the lights dimmed. A door opened at the far end of the hall. And Aristotle Dumas entered. He was taller than expected. His presence wasn't loud, it was magnetic. He wore a three-piece suit of midnight velvet, his hair slicked back, his eyes bright with something close to madness. But he didn't look unfamiliar. In fact, as he approached the center of the room, heads tilted. Eyes narrowed. A breathless recognition crept into several faces. Jack stepped forward, heart sinking. "My God," he whispered, almost involuntarily. "I've seen him before. Years ago." Dumas smiled. "I've walked among you longer than you think." Then he turned to Amanda. And everything shattered. Amanda Sinclair, he said, not as an introduction, but as a declaration. My sister. The room erupted in gasps, accusations, disbelief. Amanda's eyes widened but didn't blink. Her face went pale, lips parted, but no denial came. Not a word. Because she knew it was true. Jack's knees nearly buckled. Victor's eyes darkened. Devon stared in silence, his entire world tilting. Nate cursed under his breath. And Amanda finally stepped forward. I didn't know until recently, she said. My mother, she had a child before me. She gave him away to protect him. I found the records only weeks ago. I didn't know he was him. Dumas walked a slow circle around the group. You all built empires on names. Newman. Abbott. Winters. But I was born without one. I was erased. Hidden. Forgotten. He stopped beside Amanda. Until now. Until she gave me back my name. And now I'm giving you yours, enemies. The room stood still, no one breathing, no one daring to move. I didn't come here to negotiate, he continued. I came here to correct. The arrogance. The manipulation. The lies that stitched this town together. Your town. My sister's town. But not mine. Never mine. Amanda's voice broke. You're not doing this for me. No, Dumas said, eyes cold. I'm doing it for her. For our mother. Victor stepped forward. You've made your point. What's your endgame? Dumas turned to him slowly. Endgame, he whispered. This isn't chess, Victor. This is blood. Jack, now barely able to contain the fury building inside him, stepped in front of Dumas. If you think you can manipulate my family, my son, the way you've manipulated everyone else, you're wrong. This ends now. But Dumas only smiled. No, Jack. It just began. Would you like me to continue the aftermath? Jack confronting Amanda, Victor preparing a counterattack, or Amanda forced to choose between the family she never knew and the life she built in Genoa City?